Let me start with a scenario that plays out in organization more often than most leadership teams would like to admit. A senior leader, someone who has been holding a critical functions together for a year, resigns or gets headhunted or falls seriously ill. And suddenly the organization is scrambling. Panic sets in at the top. Name gets thrown around in emergency meetings. Someone who is not quite ready get pushed into role too soon. Someone external get hired at significant cost who takes 12 months just to understand the organization. And the function that was running smoothly 6 months ago now visually struggling. Sound familiar? Here, the uncomfortable truth behind that scenario. It was not leadership crisis. It was a succession planning failure, and it was entirely preventable. Now, since this is a longer video than usual because this topic deserves serious depth, I recommend you stay with me because by the end of this, you will have a genuinely comprehensive understanding of what successor planning actually involves at a senior organization level. Towards the end of this video, I am going to share something that most organizations fundamentally misunderstood about succession planning, a mistake so common that it actually makes this leadership pipeline weaker over time rather than stronger. So to know this, I recommend you stay with me. Hi, welcome to Unlock L&D with Samir Raj. I am Samir Raj, and this is your space to think deeper, design better, and grow as an L&D professional. Today we are going to deep into succession planning, what it really is, how it works at strategic level, and what L&D role is in building a leadership pipeline that actually holds up when the organization needs it most. So let's get into it. So what is succession planning and what it is not? Let's start by clearing up misconception that causes enormous problem in practice. Succession planning is not a spreadsheet exercise. It is not an annual HR ritual where managers nominate someone as their successor and the names get recorded in a system and everyone moves on until next year. It is not a replacement planning exercise, simply identifying who steps in when someone leaves. If done properly, succession planning is a dynamic, ongoing organizational capability. It is the deliberate process of identifying critical roles, accessing the talent pipeline against the future demands of those roles, and systematically developing individuals so that organization always has a ready and capable pool of leaders at every level. The distinction between replacement planning and succession planning is one of the most important in the entire conversation. Replacement planning is reactive. It identifies a backup for someone who leaves. Succession planning is proactive. It builds a pipeline of leaders who are continuously growing towards readiness for roles that may not even exist yet in their current form. In a rapidly changing business environment where roles evolve, strategies pivot, and leadership demands shift, replacement planning alone is dangerously inadequate. You might have identified your replacement, but is that person ready for the role as it exists in 3 years, not as it exists today? That question is what separates tactical succession thinking from genuinely strategic succession planning. So why succession planning is a business imperative, not an HR needs to have? Here is how succession planning needs to be positioned in every senior conversation as a directed business risk management tools. Consider what happens when succession planning fails. Critical role sits vacant for extended period, impacting productivity, client relationship, and team morale. External hires brought in at premium cost takes 12 to 18 months to reach full effectiveness, during which institutional knowledge gaps creates real operational risk. High potential internal talent passed over for external candidates, ultimately disengages and exits. And the organization develop a reputation in the talent market as a place where growth opportunities are limited, making future talent attractive harder and more expensive. So now consider what strong succession planning delivers. Bench strength. The organization's ability to fill critical roles quickly from within. Talent retention. High potential stay when they can see a clear development pathway and genuine investment in their growth. Reduced time to productivity. Internal successor who know the culture, the stakeholder, and the business contacts reach effectiveness significantly faster than external hires. And finally, organizational resilience. The ability to observe leadership transition without losing strategic momentum. So, when you frame succession planning in these terms, in the language of business risk, talent retention, and organizational resilience, the conversation moves out of HR and into the boardroom, where it belongs. The first practical step in any succession planning process is identifying which roles actually need succession plans. And the answer is not every role in the organization. Remember it. Critical roles are those where vacancy would cause significant disruption in business operation, strategic execution, or organizational capability. They are identified by asking three questions. What would be the business impact if this role were vacant for 6 months? How difficult would it be to find the external replacement in terms of market availability, cost, and time? And how much institutional knowledge, relationship capital, or strategic contacts does this role carry that would be difficult to transfer quickly? So, roles that score high on all three dimensions are your priority succession planning targets. These typically include senior leadership positions, but critically, they are also include high specialized technical or functional role that may sit several levels below the executive team but are disproportionately important to organizational performance. In many Indian organizations, mainly family-owned institution or large manufacturing business, critical role mapping also needs to account for roles that carry significant external relationship capital, where the role holder's personal relationship with key clients, regulators, or government stakeholders are central to business continuity. Succession in these roles require not just capability transfer, but deliberate relationship transition as well, which has its own timeline and its own development requirements. So, once critical roles are identified, the next step is assessing the depth of the pipeline against each one. This happens through a talent review process, sometimes called a talent calibration session, where leaders come together to assess their people against a consistent framework. The talent review is where succession planning moves from theory to practice, and it requires three things to work well. Listen carefully. A consistent assessment framework, so that judgment about potential and performance are made against the same criteria across different functions and geographies. Without this consistency, talent review becomes political exercise where the most vocal leaders advocate most successfully for their people regardless of actual capability. Next, a honest conversation about readiness. It is distinguishing between candidates who are ready now for critical roles and those who are ready in 1 to 2 years with targeted development and those who are ready in 3 to 5 years with significant investment. This readiness timeline is not a permanent level. It should be reviewed regularly as people develop and as role requirements to evolve. Another is senior leadership ownership, not HR ownership. Remember it. Succession planning fails when it is treated as an HR process that leaders participate in reluctantly once a year. It succeeds when the CEO and the senior leadership team treat talent pipeline health as a genuine strategic priority. One they review regularly, invest in activity, and hold each other accountable for. So this is where L&D moves from supporting player to genuine strategic partner in the succession planning process, and it is a role many L&D functions are not yet fully stepping into. L&D contribution to succession planning operates across three critical dimensions. Development planning for identified successor. Once the talent review has identified successor at different readiness level, L&D works with those individuals and their managers to design personalized development plans that close specific capability gaps. Not generic leadership programs that everyone attends, but targeted, individualized development journey built around that specific demand of the role that person is being developed towards. This might include a stretch assignment that builds experience in areas where the successor currently has limited exposure. Executive coaching to accelerate leadership maturity, action learning projects that develop strategic thinking and cross-functional collaboration, shadowing opportunity the current role holders, and formal learning intervention, but only where formal learning is generally the right solution for the specific gap. Building leadership capability at scale. Beyond developing individual successor, L&D is responsible for building the broader leadership pipeline that succession planning draws from. This means designing leadership development program that doesn't just teach leadership theory, but genuinely develop the judgment, resilience, commercial acumen, and people capability that future leaders need. The best leadership development program are built backward from the future demands of the business, asking not what leadership looks like today, but what it will need to look like in next 3 to 5 years, given where the organization is heading strategically. Measuring pipeline health and reporting to leadership. L&D should be actively tracking and reporting on succession pipeline metrics, not leaving this entirely to HR. Key metrics include succession coverage ratio, what percentage of critical role have at least one ready now successor, pipeline depth, average number of successor at each readiness level per critical role, development velocity, how quickly identified successors are progressing through their development plans, and internal fill rate, the percentage of critical role vacancies filled internally versus externally. When L&D brings these data to senior leadership conversation, it fundamentally changes how the function is perceived, from a team that runs program to a function that manages strategic organizational capability. Let's be honest about what goes wrong, because understanding failure modes is essential for building something that actually works. Treating succession planning as an annual ritual. In too many organizations, succession planning happens once a year. Names are nominated, forms are completed, the exercise is filled away, and nobody looks at it again until next year. In a business environment that changes faster than annual cycle, so this is not succession planning, this is succession theater. Nominating successor without developing them. Identifying someone as a successor is the beginning of a process, not the end of one. Yet in many organizations, the nomination is where the investment stops. The successor name is on the plan, but nobody has designed a development pathway for them. Nobody has given them stretch experiences. Nobody has had an honest conversation with them about what they need to develop. and 12 months later, they are no more ready than they were ready when they were nominated. Over reliance on performance as a predictor of potential. This is one of the most persistent and consequential errors in succession planning, and it connects directly to the 9-box grid conversation we will have separately. In my next video, I will discuss about this. High performance in a current role is not the same as high potential for future role. The skills, the mindset, and the capabilities that make someone excellent at their current level are often quite different from what will make them successful at the next level. Confusing the two produces successors who are technically excellent, but leadership ready in name only. Lack of diversity in the pipeline. Succession planning that consistently produces pipeline that look demographically similar to existing leadership is not just an equity failure, it is a strategic failure. Diverse leadership teams makes better decisions, navigate complexity more effectively, and better represent the customer and communities organizations serve. L&D and HR have a joint responsibility to actively challenge and address homogeneity in succession pipelines. Now remember what I said in earlier part of my video. I promised you something counterintuitive, and here it is. The most common mistake organizations make in succession planning, the one that actively weakens their pipeline over time, is developing successors exclusively for the roles that currently exist. Think about what that means in practice. You identify a successor for the current chief operating officer. Okay? You design their development plan around the capability of current CEO role demands. You give them experiences that build readiness for the role as it exists today. But the business is changing, evolving. In 3 years, when the succession event actually occurs, the CEO role might look fundamentally different. New technologies have changed how operations are managed. The organization has expanded into new geographies. The strategic priority has shifted, and the successor you have been carefully developing is ready for the role that no longer exists in its original form. And this is why the most sophisticated succession planning process don't just develop people for current critical roles. They develop people for the future demands of those roles, building the adaptive capability, the learning agility, and of course the strategic breadth that will enable successor to live effectively in conditions that can't yet be fully predicted. It requires L&D and HR to work closely with the business strategies to understand where the organization is heading, and to design successor development plan that build towards that future, not just towards the present. When successor planning is anchored in the future rather than present, the pipeline doesn't just fill current critical roles, it builds the leadership capability the organization needs to navigate whatever comes next. And that is the difference between a pipeline that holds up and the one that quietly breaks under pressure. So, if you are an L&D leader or business partner reading this or listening this, here is where to start. Pull up your organization's current succession plan. Ask 3 questions. For every identified successor, is there an active personalized development plan in place? Is that plan being reviewed and updated regularly? Or was it written once and filled? And is it building towards the future demands of the role or just the current ones? Your answer will tell you everything about whether your organization has succession plan or succession planning capability. And remember, they are not the same thing. So, succession planning is not about finding a replacement for when someone leaves. It is about building an organization that is never dependent on any single individuals, because the pipeline of capability runs deep enough and is developed continuously enough that leadership transition become manageable events rather than organizational crisis. So when L&D owns its role in that process, not as program provider but a genuine pipeline builder and strategic talent partner, it becomes one of the most valuable functions in the organization. And that is the standard worth building towards. So hi, I am Samir Raj and you have been watching Unlock L&D with Samir Raj. If this gives you a sharper understanding of succession planning and L&D role within it, share it with your fellow professional who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep building pipeline, keep developing people intentionally, and keep unlocking potential. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching till end. Thank you.